a.m. in New York City, 10 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. U.S. stocks bounce back from a tech-driven sell-off ahead of Micron earnings. Washington and Tehran offering conflicting accounts of the deal as the Senate presses President Trump. And U.S. diesel falling below $5 a gallon for the first time since March. Let's get a check on markets around the world now. After the massive sell-off that we saw on Tuesday, what's been happening in the latest session, Winnie Su in Hong Kong?
Good morning, Bonnie. It's another volatile day in Asia with all eyes on the upcoming earnings from Micron. So you are looking at the MSCI Asia here under a bit of pressure, down slightly, but headed for its two-day decline, the biggest in about 2 weeks. Now we have technology shares leading the decline, and hence we are seeing Taiwan's TAIEX index closing 2% lower. But with that, we also have Indonesian stocks leading declines down more than 3% after the MSCI delayed its market status review, citing that it requires more time to assess the sustainability of the reform. Now, flip over, we take a look at the Korean market because it, in fact, was the best performing gauge in Asia today, up about 3.6%. And that is being led by some positive news that Samsung is considering potentially a share buyback. But also after market, we've got SK Hynix saying that they are seeking a $26 billion listing on the Nasdaq as well.
All right, Winnie, thank you so much. So a bounce back in Korea, if not to the same extent that we saw last time there was a massive sell-off. In Europe, of course, we were a little bit more insulated, the European complex being a little more insulated from those chip stocks. And as you can see, the Stocks Europe 600 is just a little bit higher. We also just got business confidence data out of Germany that was a little better than expected. A little bit of relief for Germany that's been battered by weak economic data. And of course, there is the story in Britain. The Labour Party seems to be coalescing around Andy Burnham, which is at least giving some incremental clarity to this market. We've seen 2 days of gains for gilts, and as you can see, another 2 basis points lower on the 10-year yield today for 73 and change. We also have a little bit of weakness for the British pound for another day. JP Morgan, though, still bullish on the British pound, particularly now that there is at least the removal of some murkiness in terms of the political situation. Also, the potential for Andy Burnham to be backtracking a little bit on some of the fiscal expansion that he had been proposing originally. We'll get more of an idea of what his economic proposals are next week. Here in the United States, S&P futures look to be bouncing back. Nasdaq 100 futures, though, more particularly up more than that. Of course, we did see a bit of a sell-off in the Nasdaq. Was it a response to Korea? Was it a little bit of fear that the AI narrative is cracking? We should know more after Micron earnings and how investors react. Though bear in mind, with beats and raises recently, we have been seeing a sell-off, but overall it hasn't really meant that much for the AI trade. The Philly Stocks Index, after all, after yesterday's 7.9% sell-off, was at a record. As you can see, Brent crude continues its trajectory lower, and the 2-year yield also at 4.19, not much movement there. The dollar index continues to gain, and gold continues to sell off. It's below $4,100 an ounce now. All right, let's get to some of those individual pre-market movers. Over to London and Chloe Melly.
Good morning, Bonnie. The chip maker Cerebras Systems is down almost 15% this morning after providing an outlook that disappointed investors. So this is really this classic story that we have seen of AI-related companies actually delivering fairly solid results and outlooks, but really disappointing investors because of those elevated expectations. So we are down quite significantly there. We are also in the red for FedEx, which has warned about the impact of rising costs and those ever-shifting, ever-changing trade policies. And so we are down about 8% this morning. The margin in particular disappointed for that company. And finally, let's go over to Wendy's, which is up in pre-market trading this morning after announcing a new CFO. And so this is seen as a sign that the new CEO is really trying to shake up the management team at Wendy's. And that is seen very positively, it seems, by the market. And we're up about 13% for that company.
All right, Chloe Melly, she'll be back with us later in the hour. Also coming up this hour, more on this market rebound with Max Kettner of HSBC. Stock futures rebounding then after a tech-led slump, with the Nasdaq 100 closing down more than 3% and the Philly Semiconductor Index down almost 8%. That's as markets await the next indicator for the AI trade. Micron earnings, of course, coming this afternoon. Bloomberg Tech Europe host Tom McKenzie joins us now for a preview. So, Tom, what does Micron have to do in order to buoy this market that's had just a little bit of a wobble?
Yeah, and that's why there is so much focus, and there's some debate amongst the analyst community as to whether or not Micron is the new Nvidia in terms of the potential broader impact across the equity markets, given its focus, of course, and its exposure to high bandwidth memory and the demand that we've seen and the huge increase in pricing and the point to which that has propelled the stock to be Micron, of course, the biggest points contributor to the S&P 500's 7% plus gain year to date. So what they need to do, they need to probably come through with a beat and raise. The forecasts are they're going to come through with revenue in the quarter of about $24 billion US dollars, but it will be the guidance around how much demand there is going forward for that high bandwidth memory, if they're seeing any indications of that slowing, and of course question marks about what they're going to do around the capacity constraints as well that they face. How much capex are they going to be putting to play to build out the facilities needed to continue to supply that demand? And so that is going to be in focus for Micron. Again, the stock is up significantly year to date, about 270%, and it has become now something of a bellwether as we look at the volatility in the chip space, particularly when it comes to the high bandwidth memory place and the ripple effects that we're seeing across South Korea.
And of course, it is a DRAM maker, and investors are surely going to want to know how it's going to hold on to its territory now that SK Hynix is planning to make some more DRAM. It's also now planning to raise more money, $29 billion in a US listing to fund the AI boom. What will the reaction be to that, Tom?
Yeah, which would be one of the top five, almost top five listings ever in the US, so kind of comparable to Saudi Aramco's IPO in 2019 in terms of the amount that they're looking to raise, close to 30 billion US dollars as they look for additional funding, SK Hynix, to build out their own capacity. That is part of the rationale for tapping the US markets at a time, of course, of volatility that we've spoken about. And you're right to point out that there has been this reporting that they are maybe slowing expansion of their production of high bandwidth memory, and that has caused, at least was one of the factors that's been pointed to as to the downside pressure that came through for that stock yesterday. A little bit of repair to the damage today, but not making up for the losses. But it is that IPO expected then in July. July the 10th is when that trading is expected, so it would give US investors that additional opportunity to get exposure to another major player with about 60% of that market share when it comes to the memory space that goes into the data centers alongside those GPUs from the likes of NVIDIA and AMD.
Tom, the other big story that we've been keeping an eye on for the past several days is obviously SpaceX and its movements, right? Up 50%, back to below its first sprint price. And then it had this debt sale. How did investors react?
They did. They reacted well. They absorbed this, and it was bid, and it was well received, and it meant that actually Musk and the team then at SpaceX are able to refinance with lower rates, and so they can have that liquidity as they continue, of course, to build out what is needed around the infrastructure for example, data centers in space, and continue, of course, to build out the satellite proposition as well as the rockets part of that story. So they managed to go to the markets, having just IPO'd, of course, raising more than 75 billion US dollars, tapping the debt markets, well received, investment grade, more than $25 billion, and it means that SpaceX has refinanced again at a lower rate. So good news, at least on that level, for Elon Musk.
All right, Tom, he's going to be back with us later on in the hour. Meanwhile, in Iran, more conflicting claims on the MOU between Tehran and the United States.
Our missile program was not included in the MOU, and it shall not be. I would like to say that if it was not for Iran's missile capabilities to defend ourselves, our country would have been plundered and destroyed by the Zionist regime and the U.S., like Gaza. And they wouldn't have mercy on the young and old.
It all comes as President Trump writes on social media that the country had agreed to allow the highest level nuclear inspections long into the future. Joining us now from Dubai is Bloomberg's Abir Abu Omar. We've had conflicting accounts for the last 3 months, right, Abir? But what is sort of the crux of this particular disagreement?
Good morning, Vonnie. We're expecting to see more of these conflicting statements that you just had mentioned. So the crux of this is essentially both sides wanting to come out with their own perspectives on this MOU, or this agreement that is supposed to be temporary, leading us into the next 60 days. At the heart of this is the Strait of Hormuz, for example. Yes, it is open. A trickle of movement is going through the waterway, more so than what we had seen over the past 2-3 weeks. And this is continuing to accelerate. But one thing that has come out over the past couple of days is that Bakai, who is the foreign ministry spokesperson, said that the Strait of Hormuz will be free of tolls over the next 60 days, but then they will work with Oman to establish some kind of mechanism to start tolling it. He also said that the waterway will never go back to the state it was in before the war. President Trump and the U.S. administration has refused this narrative and says that no tolling is going to be allowed in the Strait of Hormuz unless it is for the U.S. And so this is one of the disagreements. Another disagreement is the nuclear talks. The Iranian side maintains that no nuclear talks have taken place. The U.S. side actually says that the IAEA is going to Iran to inspect those facilities. The Associated Press just reported that Grossi will be going to Iran. Iran has maintained that no talks on the nuclear issue have been discussed and that no one is going to inspect the facilities there. And then lastly, those frozen assets, $24 billion of frozen assets, Vani, Iran maintains that it's free to do with those unlocked assets as it wishes. The U.S. says no, Iran has to buy agricultural products from the United States with those unblocked assets. Now, this, the two sides continue to have those discrepancies. I think at the heart of this remains the Strait of Hormuz. And again, it's caused all this big energy crisis over the past couple of months or so, Vani. So it's important to note the tangible progress that is happening on the ground.
Yes.
And we're seeing tangible progress there. Up until June 22nd, our energy teams have noted that there are 68 million barrels of crude making their way through the Strait of Hormuz. So that is tangible progress that we're seeing there.
Huge relief for the oil markets, no doubt. Abir, thank you so much. Abir Abu Omar. In Washington, D.C., President Trump defending the unfreezing of Iranian funds. In a Truth Social post, he wrote that the money will be, quote, controlled by the USA and will be used for the purchase of food and medical supplies exclusively from the United States. The Senate voting to end the war in a rare rebuke to the president, with 4 Republicans voting yes on the measure. Joining us now is Mika Zollner of Bloomberg Government. Mika, that horse has bolted. What was the point of this rebuke?
Yeah, I think that there is a growing frustration on Capitol Hill, as we can see in this war in Iran that just seems never ending at this point. Obviously, peace negotiations are continuing, but this is not the way that the White House wants this to go. They wanted this to swiftly end and are still continuing to work through diplomatic matters to try and end this conflict. But there are a lot of lawmakers, both in the House and the Senate, as we saw yesterday, really frustrated at this, saying that they're really not getting a lot of information, that they should have the authority. This has gone on too long. And of course, this is going to likely impact the midterms in November as the American public grows frustrated too. But it also comes on the heels of President Trump's visit today to Senate Republicans. So we'll see a lot more expected this afternoon.
Sure. I mean, the war is basically over, though. I'm not sure that it timing-wise necessarily means anything. Diesel prices falling under $5, though, do mean something. President Trump saying the Justice Department is looking into gasoline prices. What can the DOJ, quote-unquote, find in this investigation, Mika?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of questions there, and this also shows how much the administration really wants, those prices to come down swiftly. As we saw, and you just mentioned, these prices are starting to fall, but the affordability and cost of living issues are still a thorn for the administration. So it just goes to show they really want to make it seen that they're taking these actions very seriously and that they want to swiftly make sure that these can fall back to pre-war levels. So we're going to see what happens here. I think we're going to get some more information on that on this week as well.
Mika, thank you so much. That is Mika Zollner of Bloomberg Government. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. Leveraged Korea ETFs tied to Samsung and SK Hynix sold an estimated $6 billion worth of shares during Tuesday's rout. Data compiled by Bloomberg show those leveraged single-stock ETFs accounted for about 14% of turnover in Samsung and SK Hynix shares. The funds must rebalance daily to maintain fixed leverage ratios. Tencent is preparing to launch an AI agent for the enterprise version of its WeChat app. The agent is built on DeepSeek's latest V4 model and lets users interact with it in natural language. Tencent shares rose as much as 6% in Hong Kong on Wednesday, their biggest intraday rise in 3 weeks. And SoftBank founder Masayoshi Son is brushing aside concerns about an AI bubble. Speaking at a shareholder meeting, Son said that characterization is inappropriate for a revolution he says is only just beginning. He also said he plans to remain at the helm of SoftBank for another 10 or 15 years to see the company through the AI boom. Coming up, European power prices jumping as a searing heatwave breaks temperature records. More on that next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. Europe is bracing for another day of unprecedented heat that has smashed records. Temperature is expected to hit 40 degrees Celsius. That's 104 Fahrenheit in parts of the UK. Red heat warnings have been issued in several countries, including France and Germany, with health authorities warning of life-threatening temperatures. Joining me now is Joe Wirtz, Bloomberg's weather and climate reporter. Joe, 40 degrees, I mean, Britain is not prepared for that. It doesn't even have an AC system for the most part. But what about the power grid? Are we going to see massive outages? Is the power grid able for this?
Yeah, we're already starting to see the power grid buckle in some areas. We've seen in France, transformers are starting to blow and leading to power outages affecting, 70,000 people there. And we're also starting to see power prices jump as, supply problems pop up. The French nuclear fleet, a lot of those reactors are cooled with river water, and those rivers are getting warm. That kicks in these environmental regulations that limit the amount of water these plants can discharge. And so several of these plants have had to curtail output. In the UK, the grid operator here put out a notice, a rare notice, saying that they about energy supply, potential energy supply shortfalls there. So we're really seeing a tightening of the market and prices increase as supply drops and demand increases across the continent.
I mean, the terrifying thing is that floods are also expected, right, Joe? Because you get one, then you also get the other. And we're anticipating an El Nino season. Is this just going to get worse, these weather fluctuations?
Yeah, look, it's important to notice we're just in June, right? The hottest months are still ahead of us, and we're already seeing these types of disruptions. It's London Climate Week right now in London, and we've had events at London Climate Week get postponed and canceled due to the extreme temperatures here. And like you said, a lot of the built environment here is not ready for the heat, not prepared for the heat from the energy grid to just people's day-to-day lives, transport here, trains, subways, and things like that. We're seeing train cancellations and delays really across the continent. Here in the UK, France, Netherlands, it's just not built, wasn't built for these types of temperatures and not these temperatures this early.
Particularly the northern countries, right, Joe? I assume it's going to be even worse in the southern countries, though they are maybe a little more used to extreme heat. Where are authorities most worried? Where are the very vulnerable spots across Europe?
Well, really, the heat wave right now is this high pressure heat dome that's been centered over Europe, and really the epicenter of that has been France. They are now just today in a full week of having heat wave conditions there. Day-to-day life in France has really been disrupted. They've had to close early, close down tourist spots like the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower. Close tours there early before the afternoon temperatures start getting too hot. And suspend a lot of activities, festivals, other events throughout the city. And it's really put day-to-day life at a standstill. So yeah, it's been particularly pernicious there in France. But now we're starting to see that heat dome spread, and the hotter temperatures move up north into London and spread across the continent. Probably won't get the same extremes that we've seen in France and in Paris here in London, but 37 degrees forecast here in London today and on Friday. And like you said, potential even higher temperatures elsewhere in the UK. Potentially disruptive and historic event.
Joe, thank you so much. Bloomberg's Joe Wirtz. Coming up, New York City Mayor Mamdani as kingmaker. More on New York City primary results. And look what else is making headlines in your front page news. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. Time now for your front page news. First up on the New York Times, 3 progressive candidates backed by New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani winning congressional primaries in New York City. The Times says the results sent shockwaves through the Democratic Party as incumbents backed by the city's political establishment, including major labor unions, lost. The winners all share Mamdani's economic platform. Next up, the Financial Times reporting Venezuela's plan to reveal a debt pile of $240 billion is on the way. Now, that's a figure much larger than market estimates as the country embarks on the biggest sovereign restructuring in history. The interim leader, Delcy Rodriguez, aiming to reach a deal with creditors by the end of the year that would pave the way for the country's return to international markets. It's been frozen out for nearly a decade. And finally, on the Wall Street Journal's front page, Russia's pressure campaign on Belarus. Moscow looking to strengthen its military union with the country in the hopes of potentially using it as a new front. Coming up, we're going to speak with Max Kettner. It's 5:30 a.m. in New York City, 10:30 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. U.S. stocks look for a bounce from a tech-driven sell-off. This all ahead of Micron earnings. Washington and Tehran offer conflicting accounts of the deal as the Senate presses President Trump. And U.S. diesel falls below $5 a gallon for the first time since March. All right, markets-wise, we did see Korea bounce back. The Kospi was back up, but just about 3.25%, and we did see a little bit of a sell-off in Taiwan. So jitters spreading, but again, we did see a comeback in Korea to a certain extent, and that may be cheering the U.S. because we have Nasdaq 100 futures pointed to a gain of 0.5% at the open. We'll see if we can gain back all that we lost yesterday. The SOX index, for example, was down 7.9%. We might have to wait until after Micron earnings, of course, after the bell, in order to see how this really plays out and whether there really is a crack in the AI narrative or this is just as investors perhaps looking to take some profit and move elsewhere where there might be more upside to come. Brent crude continues its trajectory lower, down more than 2%. And then if we look at the dollar index, it continues to strengthen. Bonds also continue to strengthen, but just a little bit, with the 2-year yield down less than a basis point. Gold selling off still. It is below $4,100 an ounce. Let's get to some individual movers now this pre-market session. Here's Chloe Melly in London.
Good morning, Bonnie. The chipmaker Cerebras Systems is plunging this morning after its outlook disappointed investors. This is yet another case of an AI-related company failing to meet those really elevated investor expectations. And that is something that is perhaps worth keeping in mind as we wait for those Micron results as well later today. Moving on to FedEx, which is also in the red this morning after warning of the negative impact of inflation and ever-changing trade policies. We had profit beating expectations, but then margin disappointing, and this cautious outlook from the company hitting those shares this morning. And finally, let's go over to Rheinmetall over in Germany, which is also down this. Oh, actually, we'll do Wendy's instead. Wendy's, which has appointed a new chief financial officer, and so the new CEO, is currently really trying to shake up the management team, and that is something that is being received quite positively by the market. And we're up actually now more than 15% for Wendy's in pre-market trading.
Okay, a lovely move for Wendy's. And just in case anyone was really wondering, Rheinmetall is down 14%. Chloe, thank you so much. Chloe Melly. Joining us now, though, is Max Kettner, Chief Multi-Asset Strategist at HSBC. Max, a big crack in the AI narrative or just Korea being Korea?
Yeah, it's just Korea being Korea, really. I think, look, I think when we talk about the cracks in the AI narratives, that's literally one day. So I am waking up this morning, I'm like, wow, have I missed anything? I mean, in reality, the S&P is a couple % off the all-time highs. You know, spreads have barely moved. I think one of the things that we're missing as well is when we look at semis, yes, let's assume the trade in semis and chips is over, right? Let's assume, let's hypothetically go through that. But actually, haven't we sold the hyperscalers? Haven't we been downbeat on the hyperscalers really for the best part of the last year? If you look at the hyperscalers at a group in the US, they're now flat year over year. They're down 7% since the start of the year, despite earnings still growing. If you look at their PEs as a group, they're down 20% relative to their respective 5-year average. Actually, wouldn't we then be saying, you know what, those kind of ROI assumptions, those kind of assumptions that we made on profitability for those capex to be paid off that we thought are going to be really, really difficult to achieve, actually now they're easier to achieve because we've got actually lower chip prices, lower token prices. So now, instead of selling the hyperscalers, I'm actually buying the hyperscalers and I'm selling the semis. Now, both of those groups are roughly equally sized in terms of their market cap weight in the S&P. That means overall on the headline index, I don't think that's much of a deal, really.
So just a rotation, but within the AI trade almost, Max, which is, quite something to think about. I do want to ask you, though, with the war, quote unquote, out of the way, I mean, basically it's not happening anymore unless it restarts, which, seems unlikely. Are investors starting to think about what they may have been not worried about while the war was on?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually a bit more broadening that can happen, particularly in the US, but also globally. I think when you look at Europe, for example, Europe perhaps has been a little bit forgotten. We look at the last 3-4 months, activity surprises really have been dismal in Europe compared to the likes of the US. US exceptionalism really, really making a strong comeback. But then when you look at the equity market, you look at, for example, earnings revisions in Germany, they have continued to be pretty strong. Look at what just happened with the banks. Right, in Europe, we've seen a bit of steepening in the Bund curve, and the banks are rock and roll. So I do think really some of that broadening, not even only within the US, but really globally does make sense. I would single out really the European banks because they don't just have that Iran narrative that you were just describing. If I go into things like construction and materials in Europe, that is really, really just very exposed to that one Middle East narrative. I think when you have the banks, there is a bit more things to get going for, particularly when you look at earnings revisions. The worst that we've seen in earnings revisions in European banks was that they were just flat to the overall market at some point in the last four months. So the worst that happened wasn't that they underperformed. They were just performing in line with the market. Now they're up again against the market. And of course, overall, I think what should help that broadening theme as well is lower oil prices. Oil prices, if they really, the new ranges, let's say $70 to $75, sure. We're not back to the 60 to 65, but who cares? Like, that's good enough. That's really good enough for a lot of that growth narrative and re-acceleration narrative to come back, the narrative that we had in January and February, for us to start re-engaging with those sorts of narratives.
And interestingly, Max, you mentioned US exceptionalism. In fact, you think there's an expiration date and that it's pretty soon. In fact, it's going to be this summer. This is a quote from your note. You reckon around the mid to the end of the third quarter, but you say it needn't be bad, and I presume that's because of some of what you just said. There are opportunities elsewhere. You also have your underweight in treasuries, for example. Where else? What other asset classes might you be expressing this through?
Yeah, look, I think there is a bit of broadening in US equity markets, right? Perhaps consumer stocks, stuff like that. So really the broadening in the US equity market, that can continue. That's number one. I am grappling with when do we go back into Europe, right? Is that really something where perhaps people have given up a little bit too much on and are reading too much into that US exceptionalism thing? Bonnie, just to give you an example, in our Q2 outlook 3 months ago, we wrote second quarter will be all about US exceptionalism. We'll talk way too much about geopolitics. We talk way too little about how strong the data is. Now, everyone's talking about the strong US data. Everyone agrees that US exceptionalism is back. Everyone wants to be paying US rates and everyone's dismal on Europe. I think there is an expiration date around August, why August? Because in June and July last year, remember, activity surprises took a little bit of a dive because we had a bit of a payback from that front-loaded demand, that inventory buildup after Liberation Day. What we feared was perhaps some sort of tariff-related jump in prices. And then June and July data surprised a little bit to the downside. So we have very low base effects now in June and July data for the US. That means, I think, for the next month and a half, 2 months, probably still pretty good activity surprises in August. I think then you want to take a couple of chips on the table, both on the rate side and that US versus European duration call, but also perhaps really leaning a bit more into that European story.
Sure, and all of this has to partially do with the fact that we have a new Fed chair as well, who you don't think is potentially as hawkish as the market thought after the first FOMC meeting. But you're closing on the basis of that. You're double overweight in EM rates and also gold. Might be a little bit late for that because gold is now below $4,100 an ounce. But explain rate differentials and how you think they're going to work over the next couple of quarters.
Yeah, I think gold has some further ways to go down, number one, because I think that de-dollarization story is really put to bed, at least for a couple of months. Now, on the EMD side, I think that's mostly really an FX story. When you look at rate differentials, we probably should actually be at sub 110 on euro dollar, right? So again, there is a bit more space to go. As I said, there is an expiration date. What we're doing right now is we're trading narratives. We're not really trading the facts. Right? If I say to you, look, the US is really reaccelerating, US growth is really reaccelerating, US inflation is kind of stuck. That's not new. That was the same 2 months ago. It was the same 3 months ago. That's really been the case since December last year. It was just that no one wanted to listen. It was, oh no, Kevin Walsh is coming in. And you know what? Kevin Walsh is going to be dovish because that's his job. And, you know, when I then said, well, he's 1 out of 12, are we really sure the committee is going to be swayed that easily? No. That was the Kevin Walsh is dovish narrative. Now it's the complete opposite. So I think that the next narrative change that we need to try to time is, when is the point where the dollar is too extended, where perhaps then we start to increase emerging market debt again, where we can also then buy gold again? Because let's face it, when you look at the 5 task forces of Kevin Walsh, you know, things like inflation framework, AI and productivity, right? So those sorts of things. They look pretty dovish to me, these potential outcomes from these task forces. So again, that hawkish narrative around the Fed, that also has an expiration date. You don't want to lean against that right now, but I think in 2-3 months' time, that's the time to when you start to lean against that.
Next meeting, July 29th. Can't wait to hear your thoughts after that. Max, thank you so much. As always, Max Kettner of HSBC. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. SoftBank founder Masayoshi Son is brushing aside concerns about an AI bubble. Speaking at a shareholder meeting, Son said that characterization is inappropriate for a revolution he says is only just beginning. He also said he plans to remain at the helm of SoftBank for another 10 or 15 years to see the company through the AI boom. Amazon's annual Prime Day sale is off to a slow start, according to a survey conducted by market research firm Numerator. The survey found the average household had spent $89 as of 4 p.m. New York time Tuesday, down 16% from the same point during last year's event. Shoppers are looking for deeper discounts that brands and merchants are struggling to offer. A $7 billion private credit fund run by Morgan Stanley is capping investor withdrawals at 5%. The fund is allowing less than half the redemptions shareholders requested in Q2. Withdrawal requests across the $1.8 trillion private credit market have generally risen this quarter after many funds limited full exits in the prior period. Coming up, some Republican senators break from President Trump with votes to end the war in Iran. More on that next. This is Bloomberg.
The average price of gasoline nationwide is down 60 cents a gallon just from a short while ago. And remember this. We had to make this detour. We had to go to Iran. You can't let them blow up the Middle East and then us, if that's possible. We would have gotten them before, but they would have blown up Israel. They would have blown up the entire Middle East. You can't let that. You want to see a bad economy? That's a bad economy. So, but remember that our oil in the middle of this conflict was less than it was for sleepy Joe Biden. And we're putting out a fire.
The cost of diesel in the U.S. dropping below $5 a gallon for the first time since mid-March. This as President Trump ordered the Department of Justice to look into gasoline prices ahead of the midterm elections. Joining us now from Washington is Mika Sullner. Mika, what on earth can the DOJ do? It doesn't set the price of oil. All right, I think we're going to return to Mika in a moment. We'll just get her unmuted or fix her audio in some way. In the meantime, let me give you a market check because it has been a fascinating night. Korea bounced back to the tune of about 3.25%. That said, we did actually see some losses elsewhere in Asia, specifically Taiwan, where some of the semiconductor makers there dropped. In the US, it does look like we might be in for a positive day so far in the early going. All right, I think we have Mika back now. Mika, how is the Department of Justice going to come to any findings that placate the president or send prices lower?
Yeah, I think that we're going to see more action on that this week. This is a huge sign that the administration is largely worried about gas prices, even as they're falling in the wake of them trying to end and negotiate this ongoing peace deal with the ending the conflict in Iran. I think that we're going to get more answers. President Trump's also likely going to speak about this today when he comes to talk to Senate Republicans on the Hill. And so this is one step I think that the president is taking in terms to make it seem like the administration is taking these high gas prices and cost of living very seriously.
In other domestic news, the Senate rebuked President Trump 3 months after the war started and essentially as the war really is over. What is the use of this rebuke? What message does it send anyone?
Yeah, I think the message is that there is a growing frustration on Capitol Hill on the Iran war. I mean, if you look at the senators that did rebuke President Trump, it's no surprise. It's some of the moderate coalition that often defies the president. But I think that the president is also getting frustrated with the Senate as well. And he said that in his Truth Social post last night, saying that this was poorly timed and that these senators are making essentially his life harder right now at the moment. And we're going to see the president come speak to senators in a closed-door meeting later today. We'll see if we can get any information on what comes out of it. But it comes at a very tumultuous time between Capitol Hill and the White House as the president really tries to push for his priorities that many in the upper chamber are resistant to.
And then briefly, Mika, Congress did pass that housing bill. It was a rare bipartisan accord. Does it help the affordability narrative? Will people start to be able to actually buy homes again?
Yes, I mean, that's the goal of the bill, and that's going to be another issue that Republicans are hopeful that they can run on in the midterms as they kind of lack some of the legislative victories outside of these tax cuts.
All right, Mika Sollner, thank you so much. That is Mika Sollner in Washington. Let's move to Micron now, because that is indeed the story of the day. We're waiting for those earnings after the bell. Let's bring in Peter Elstrom, who's going to tell us what the market needs to hear from Micron. So, Peter, thanks so much for joining. I mean, essentially, the world doesn't change overnight, no matter what Micron tells us. So what is the thing that Micron could say that actually would crack this AI narrative in a bit more of a permanent way?
Well, just to set the scene a little bit, Vonnie, it's an important question. We've had quite a 24 hours in tech stocks broadly, and especially the chip stocks that we've seen. Yesterday, we saw this selling begin in South Korea, where Samsung and SK Hynix were both down quite hard. That spilled into the U.S. We saw the Philly chip index drop about 8% yesterday. Micron was one of the hardest hit there. The stock fell 13%. One of the analysts at BTIG called it a chip wreck, which was quite a term. And as you say, it really sets up Micron's earnings. Now, it's important to remember that Micron stock is still way up this year, more than 200%. At this point. So after the bell, investors really want to see what the company is saying about future demand, not just the results for the past quarter, but what is future demand for AI. There's some questions about how quickly this build out of AI capacity is happening at this point. Are they seeing demand continue? The numbers from Micron should be pretty strong in any case. Revenues are supposed to more than triple at this point. Profit should go up 10x, something like that. So these are very robust numbers for Micron. But the question is really that guidance going forward. How strong is the AI build out? Is this continuing at the same kind of pace that we've seen in past quarters?
And I mean, even that, will it be enough? Even, Micron's expansion of its gross margin to like even the mid 80s, this idea that we're going to get, a massive uptick in revenue and that maybe the capital spend will increase as well. Will that be enough to keep this SOX index, for example, continuing to attain records? At what point, is enough enough?
Well, I'd say memory chip stocks are particularly sensitive to this because the memory chips that they're selling at this point are commodities. Prices are really skyrocketing because of this shortage in the memory chips that they're trying to use in this build out. So Micron, Samsung, SK Hynix are all sort of caught in this vortex where profits are going up very, very rapidly. We've seen this at SK Hynix in particular, which has been the leader in the memory chips used for the AI build-out, the HBM chips in particular. So their shares have been soaring at this point. Their market cap was just a fifth of Samsung's a few years ago, and now it's essentially tied with Samsung with a market cap of about $1.2 trillion. Micron is the third player in that market. And because these are commodity chips, if they can price, say, 4 or 5 times higher than it was before, the margins are incredible for them. But what investors really want to know is whether that's a short-term blip. The memory chip industry is known for being supremely cyclical. You know, you get a lot of big profits at one point, but if they're going to crash the next year, that's difficult for them. So they want to hear from Micron whether this is sustainable, whether the AI build-out is going to continue for another quarter, another years, what they really anticipate the build-out is going to be for the next few years.
And interestingly about SK Hynix announcing today that it's going to list in the US, a $29 billion listing. So if you didn't have enough of the memory chip stocks and various other AI-related stocks in your portfolio, are you going to have another chance to add to them? But it is a good point, though, right, Peter, what you say. The only thing I would push back on is if you need memory chips, you need to renew them in a couple of years, right? So once you gain the business, assuming the switching costs aren't too high, then you keep the business.
Yeah, the numbers in these fundraisings are getting pretty amazing. I mean, it's $29 billion that SK Hynix is talking about. You know, in past years, we talk about what a stunning record that is. This may actually get lost this year because we've had the SpaceX IPO. We've had Google's fundraising for tens of billions of dollars, too. But for SK Hynix, this is a big deal. So one of the key constraints in the memory chip industry right now is capacity. SK Hynix has talked about this. Samsung has. Certainly Micron will after the bell today. SK Hynix wants to be able to raise this $29 billion to be able to build additional capacity. They're building in South Korea. They're also building some facilities in the United States. So they want to be able to add that capacity. This is something, of course, that their customers really want because they don't want to see these soaring prices anymore. But it is a bit of a question mark for the rest of the industry because if you add too much capacity and if you end up overbuilding from what the demand is, then you're looking at a future where maybe that cycle starts to go down. Maybe prices go down, profits go down, revenue go down. That's bad for everybody in the industry.
Peter, cannot wait to go through those Micron earnings and see your take on them. Executive Editor for Global Technology, Peter Elstrom, thank you. Coming up, we're going to set you up for your trading day. This is Bloomberg. Now, look at what's ahead today with President Trump heading to Capitol Hill for a lunch meeting with Senate Republicans. We also have the Fed releasing its latest bank stress tests at 4 p.m. and the latest read on the AI rally with those Micron earnings after the bell. Speaking of Micron, it is ahead of those earnings higher today, but that is a bounce back from a 13% drop yesterday. A really tough session for a stock that's up 270% year to date. Cerebras, wow, down 14%. The sales outlook disappointed. It's trading around the 200 mark. Its first print after its IPO was 350. FedEx also getting punished. Let's take a look at your macro picture as we head into Wednesday.